We are back with Croy. He's the leader of Croy and the Boys. The new album is What Good's the Medicine? And the song you just heard is Throw 'em Out. Um, as you put it, there are certainly a lot of negative thoughts expressed on this album when it comes to being working class and the society we live in. But towards the end, you drop this song that you not only argue things can be better, but you argue that humanity is fundamentally better than the majority of people give it credit for. Tell me what gives you that faith in us as a society.
Yeah, I mean, that song's probably the closest I'll ever get to a manifesto. That was really me just trying, we have so many words to describe different political camps and thoughts on the economy and all these things. And so often it feels like we're just talking at each other and we have different, opposing sides have different interpretations of the same word. And so that song was me just trying to kind of break down exactly how I feel. Yeah, about humanity and about what our potential is and what a better society to me looks like. I think it's really helpful to spend time thinking about what a better world might look like and trying to, instead of just looking at problems, trying to think about like, you know, what would it look like if those problems didn't exist or if they did get fixed. So anyways, but I think fundamentally, yeah, I do think that human beings are we are a communal species. You know what I mean? I mean, we're not the fastest, we're not the strongest, we don't have big claws or sharp teeth. You know what I mean? But we've been able to survive and overcome. And we do that through community. That's the way we've always been able to survive. It's like by working together, we were able to hunt woolly mammoths or whatever. So yeah, I think that I just think going back throughout human history, it's been the things that we do together that is really what's defined our humanity. And so I think that we happen to live in a system now that pits us against each other in a lot of ways. But I think that that's unnatural, and it obviously is having adverse consequences on kind of all of us and on society at large. But I think that, and because I think that we are made to work together and to solve problems together. And I think that if you get rid of a lot of that kind of competitive, the things that kind of compel us to be competitive with each other, I think we would find that we have a much easier time working together than trying to compete against each other.
Okay. How do we get rid of that?
Well, I mean, I think that just letting everything kind of be dictated by profit motives is probably not the best way to organize all of society. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure there's some competitiveness inside of some of us, so maybe some of that is helpful. But I mean, just kind of making that the fundamental part of the human condition that we're going to focus everything on is just doesn't seem like the best way for me. So I think I'm really into co-ops. I like collective ownership. I'm in a union. I like the idea of workers working together to make decisions. I'm a big fan of there's a phrase, democratize the enterprise. I like expanding democracy into the economic sphere, just giving more people more say, more control, and yeah, less like I said, less just competitive profit pressure on individuals.
One of the lines in that song that really fascinated me was talking about how we're free to choose from this very limited set of options. What to you does a truly free society with lots of options look like?
Right. Well, there's a phrase I've heard it. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's something like, yeah, the world of true freedom ends where the world of necessity. Sorry, the world of true freedom begins where the world of necessity ends. And so, as long as the mass of people on the planet are not having their basic needs met, or are fighting, like working as hard as they possibly can just to make sure that they get those basic needs met, then they aren't living a life of true freedom because they're still just kind of trying to get to that basic stable point of survival. So to me, I mean, it just looks like people having a lot more necessities kind of taken care of, whether that's housing, food, access to healthcare, access to education, things like that. And then from there, I think people can operate a lot more freely to make uh, actual decisions in their actual best interests. But until then, I think we're all just stuck, you know, within these confines of like, if things don't go exactly right now, I might not have a house in 2 months, or I might not have food on the table next week. You know what I mean? That's not free living. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm not sure if humans can. I mean, I think that maybe all this can happen, but on so many different scales, we're talking about far off.
Sure. Yeah.
We need a lot better technology for everyone to have their basic needs met cheaply enough that we don't have to work so hard for it.
Right.
Oh, I could imagine it, but I don't know if we're necessarily close to it. And
Yeah. I mean, there's so much money in the world. You know what I mean? I feel like we could all work a little bit less and get paid more and kind of be right where we're at. You know what I mean? And that would free up a lot of time. I'm a fan of the 4-day work week, which I think is totally attainable. If you look at how much CEOs and people at the top make versus how much us workers make, I think that you could close that gap and there'd be a lot more money at the bottom end. And then I think we're really close to solving scarcity, kind of in a ton of different ways. I mean, we really, our productive capacity is pretty immense as a uh, kind of across the globe. And I think that just better allocation of resources and more just I think that if we prioritize these things, like I said in the early verse of that song, that if we just as a society focused on trying to eradicate poverty and trying to eradicate hunger and things like that. I mean, I think personally that we have the technology and the money to do it all. Um it's just not a priority. I think that we haven't even seen what we could do if we started to prioritize those things, because I don't think across the board we've prioritized them in any meaningful way.
I guess the other thing I mean by time, and this one I think you'll have a little more trouble arguing with. If society is going to change its priorities, we're going to need a massive change in terms of which generations are voting.
Mm,
And that's only going to come with Generation Z aging into the ballot box, the next generation in line aging into the ballot box. And it's only
yeah.
going to come with some of the older generations, concluding their natural lives and
Yeah, I mean,
maybe not voting so heavily for, I don't know, the way I see it, every election, I've stopped seeing them as chances for things to get better and started seeing them more as chances for things not to get worse while we wait for something to come save us in the form of that generational shift or possibly
yeah,
somehow people waking up.
yeah. I mean, to me, a lot of that just comes from I mean, we can just speak partisanly, though. I'm not really much into partisan politics. I feel like I live a little outside of the American political spectrum. But I mean, so to me, you know, the Democratic Party doesn't provide meaningful options for change either. You know what I mean? If it was that simple, then I think there's a
Like I
reason that
said,
people
like
that
I said, I feel like I'm
yeah.
voting for things not to get worse rather than for things to get better.
Right. And there's a reason that you feel that way, and you're right to feel that way. And that's because the Democrats aren't providing anything other than just things not getting worse, you know? Joe Biden said as he was running to, that nothing will fundamentally change. That was like a campaign promise. So we've seen that to be true, and as far as supporting working people, I mean, there was a lot of stuff in labor press, at least, about a big railroad strike that was looming earlier this year, and it looked like it could be. They had a ton of power. They were organized, and it looked like they could really win the demands that they deserved. And before they could call that strike, Joe Biden intervened and said that they weren't legally allowed to strike, that people would lose their jobs, they'd be replaced. So, I mean, he stood on the side of capital against labor when it really mattered, even though he likes to tout himself as a pro-labor president. So working people see that, you know what I mean? So I don't think it's as cut and dry as people voting against their self-interest. I don't really see voting Democrat as being voting for our self-interest either. To your point, I do think that we are a ways away from having meaningful third-party challengers. I mean, the system's kind of set up to only allow these two parties.
Yeah, I'm thinking less
But
that it would
you
be
know,
in the form of a third party challenger and more of the Democrats being forced to shift their message as the majority of their base
yeah,
becomes the far more left leaning younger generations.
yeah. I'm skeptical of that possibility just because I think there's been leftward pressure on the Democrats. Obviously the 80s and 90s and early 2000s have been a lull in left-wing politics in America, but I mean, you know, lefties were fighting against the Democratic Party in the since the turn of the century without really much headway there. I'm skeptical that the Democrats could ever be persuaded. I mean, I think they're fundamentally represent the interests of capital and business owners and the ruling class in general. So I don't put a lot of faith in much action in the Democratic Party. I think that it's going to have to come from outside that, whether that's from third parties. That's what I would hope for, I guess. I'm not like a necessarily a violent revolutionary. I'm down with trying to find some sort of a way to get there electorally, at least right now. And to me, that would be third party stuff. But I mean, and that could, or fourth party stuff too. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people on the right that are also unhappy with what's going on in the Republican Party. So I would love to see a whole world of parties popping up on all sides of the spectrum.
Well, let's hope there's some change in some shape or form.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you listening to the record and uh, you know, putting so much thought into the songs. I really appreciate that.
So, yeah, I like to conclude my interviews by having the guest choose a song that they had nothing to do with producing, and with you rocking that El Tigres de Norte merch in the back of your room, let's have you choose one of their songs.
Okay, cool. I guess let me think. Kind of like one of their first hits. So Los Tigres del Norte, I like to call them the Rolling Stones of Mexico. They were kind of like like pop stars in their own right, but definitely kind of bad boys too. And so do you have time for like a real brief little
Sure.
lesson on this music? Okay, so um there's a style of song from Mexico called the corrido, and that's like a kind of an old folk style. It was really popular during the Mexican Revolution, and it was kind of how people would share in the similar way that we have ballads and things in American folk music. It's kind of how they would share stories about battles and heroes of the Mexican Revolution. So Pancho Villa has like a ton of corridos about him. And so it kind of like lionized these figures of the revolution. It was real popular in the early 1900s. And then It kind of was dying out as a folk form, and then kind of in the early 70s, I think, maybe the late 60s, all of a sudden songwriters started to write what we now call narco corridos, and that was like basically taking that form and then updating the main characters instead of be these heroes of the revolution to be the kind of to talk about these narco figures and kind of drug trafficking and all these things. And so one of the first hits to really break out from that was Los Tigres del Norte, and they had a song called La Camelia, and that yeah, kind of jump started this whole narco corrido fad, which is still very popular today. It's gotten a little more poppy, a little more produced, but there's now tons and tons of artists that do it, and drug cartels will like hire songwriters to write songs about them specifically about the people that so yeah, it's kind of a fascinating little subgenre of Mexican music, I guess. So yeah, I'm going to choose La Camelia, which is like the kind of one of the first narco corridos to really be a hit and really put Los Tigres del Norte on the map.
All right. Croy, thank you so much.
Thank you.